Well, hello everyone, and welcome back again to Love and Law. My name is Virginia Warren. I'm a lawyer and conflict alchemist and co-founder of the organisation called Lawyers for Love. At Lawyers for Love, we see that the legal system in its present form uses fear-based techniques to solve problems. Lawyers for Love say to solve a problem, you need a higher level of consciousness than was used to create the conflict. We say that consciousness is based in love. We call it love as of the essence, consciousness, or Leotech for short. Now, in this broadcast, we are showcasing lawyers globally who are bringing some love into legal practice in their very own unique way, because love can be different for many people. And today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce emerging neuroscientist and lawyer, Elva Zhang. Elva was an international student from China, and she always wanted to study law as a little girl. Growing up, she read many stories about change makers such as Lincoln and Gandhi, and somehow made the connection that to change the world, one had to be a lawyer. So that's why Elva decided to study law. She reflects that studying law and working in law as an international student was not an easy one, however. Working as in-house corporate counsel for a global shipping company in Melbourne, Elva spreads her passion through her creative platform called Peace Lab. Peace Lab uses ancient wisdom practices and contemporary neuroscience knowledge to share effective and practical ways to lead a more meaningful and productive modern life. Now, everyone defines love differently. Elva says the word love in Chinese, and she gives a character, which I think I've put in the description down there so you can have a look at that, has the same pronunciation as the English word I. So Elva says, love must be an act of self-love first and foremost. I think that's so beautiful. Elva is currently experiencing the beautiful synergy between the most ancient and the most contemporary whilst undertaking a master's in applied neuroscience with King's College in London. These studies bring another interesting dimension to her legal practice. So thank you so much, Elva, for joining us today and bringing some ancient wisdom into the modern world. I absolutely love what you're doing, and we've talked about these sorts of things so many times, and it's just beautiful to have a conversation because we are so on the same page.
I
So
know.
the first question I ask all the lawyers that come onto the program is, what you said you wanted to study law as a little girl because you wanted to change the world. Tell me about your journey into law school, and where you are now.
Wow, long story. I love to go back where I start, and as that little girl in China, actually. So I'm from China. I grew up in China. So I came to study in Australia as international student. 20 years ago now. Long time ago. So as a kid, as a child, I've always been very interested in politics, international studies, and then that's where I start reading about, wow, I realized, or I made that connection. The more you read, the people change the world tend to be somehow with a legal background. So in my little mind, maybe I was around 11, 12, or like middle school time when you start reading those books, I thought, I really wanted to do something positive, help others, change the world. But it seems to be, to me at that time, you have to be a lawyer. So that was a connection I made. So I was quite determined, that single-minded focus, I want to be a lawyer. And then I left my family. I came to study in Australia around 2001. And so in 2001, I was in Brisbane first, and then I came to study in Melbourne to undertake a foundation course with the Trinity Foundation and study at the University of Melbourne. Again, I was very determined that I want to study law, and it was quite challenging because then I realized, wow, it's very hard to study in English because, in China, we only learned about English for back then maybe 4 or 5 years. So wow. Lucky me, I got into law school, and I still remember to this day, the first class I went into, I think it was torts. And I sat in that class, I looked around all my Australian peers and other fellow students, and I was like, what was the lecture talking about? I really had no idea, and I was very confused at the end of that particular class. I rang my mother. Virginia, I rang my mother. I professed to her. I said, Mom, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, but I'm not sure whether this is for me because I do not even understand what the lecturer was talking about, this torts thing or this tort thing. And my
Yeah, I
mom,
was going to say you probably got the snail in the bottle case. You're thinking, what's a
I know,
snail doing in a bottle?
correct.
Yeah,
And that was the thing. I think that was a few classes later already. But the first one, I think at least, the contract law part was slightly easier, but torts for the first class, I don't know why. It was
wow.
really challenging. And luckily, through synchronicity, the second class I went, after speaking to my mom, I decided not to give up on the first goal. So I went back and I sit next to, I think, an Australian student. I can't remember. I think it was a young boy. And I just asked, I said, did you understand what he was talking about? He looked at me and said, not really. So I felt a bit better. I know it's not funny now, but I felt a bit better. I thought, oh, I was thinking in my head, maybe it's not just me. Maybe it's not just me. I'll give a go.
Yeah,
So as a result of that, I persisted, and I'm glad to say I didn't quit law school. So, um,
yeah.
however, I really believe everything happens for a reason. So during that 4 or 5 years studying law at Melbourne Uni, because the challenges faced by me as international students, mostly from the language, because we both know law is all about the precision of language. A
Yeah.
lot of times we argue, we debate about a certain word, or even, a comma, where to put a comma or period. It's important. And also, I guess, growing up in China, it's a very different social and political structure. Even a simple concept of separation of power wasn't not known to me prior to studying in Australia. So all these elements add up. So I was quite stressed out actually as a student who was studying law. Then I start taking upon practicing meditation and towards the very last year of my law school because I need to find a way to cope with my stress. I
So
wasn't.
how did you know that? How did you know that meditation was going to help you? Did you know about meditation beforehand or?
I didn't practice meditation, but I think that was around the time, yoga meditation became popular slowly. But it's very different climate compared to now. Now everyone's like, it's very vogue to practice meditation, yoga. Back then, I had to be a closet practitioner of meditation. I didn't tell anyone in law school I was, trying to learn about meditation. I actually didn't go to any formal yoga studio or retreat at the time because part of me was worried. I don't want people to think, oh, she's a bit of a hippie. She's,
Yeah.
person. She needs to be
You're
very
a
logical.
serious lawyer. Yeah, you're
That's
serious.
right.
Yeah,
I
that's
had
right.
to be very serious. No meditation, no mindfulness. At that time, that's how I perceived. So
Yeah.
for about a year, I was practicing self-study meditation. It was actually very basic. I would have forced myself every day to close my eyes, sitting there, breathing, or using candle as a point of focus,
Yeah.
just to kind of take my mind away from the stress, to shift my attention. Quite rudimentary now looking back, but somehow, for that 4 or 6 months, it somehow worked, and that was really the start of my own well-being journey, and find a way to stress manage myself. So yeah, that's the law school journey. And then, like everyone, you graduate from law school, you face a new challenge looking for jobs and then working as a junior lawyer. But I'm a strong believer everything does happen for a reason. All the
Oh, yeah.
challenges now looking back, even the first 2 years in particular, looking for a law job as and during GFC global financial crisis was quite challenging as well. But when you do have a job, when I was being offered a job, I was very grateful. And yeah, so that's my journey into law, and the rest is history, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting that the meditation idea has shifted, and you've bought, now you've developed Peace Lab. So tell me how that came about. Why did you choose to do all this?
Okay. So there's a second chapter of my journey into law, I guess. So after a few years of practicing, I decided to pursue a master degree in international law. So that was around 2013, 2014. So I embarked a further study in Switzerland, Geneva, to do a master in international economic law, because the part of me as a child, apart from want to be a lawyer, I was quite specific. I wanted to be an international lawyer. So I wanted to do more like international relations, international law. So after a few years of practicing Australia, I thought, you know what, it's time for me to really fulfill my potential as my little girl wanted me to do. And so I went to Geneva. I was studying at the Graduate Institute, literally next door to the WTO office. And we have a small group of students coming from different parts of the world. And I was undertaking the stream specializing in international economic law. The funny thing is, at that time, I actually thought I was very close to my dream of being an international law lawyer. And yet, after 1 year of studying, and it was there and then, I remember I was taking a long walk along the Geneva River. I actually realized, is this really what I wanted to do? I wasn't sure, Virginia, and also the market there was quite competitive for anyone around the world wanted to pursue a career in international law. They would go to Geneva or New York because that's where all the international organizations were based or headquartered. So that really made me question, what is the true essence of my dream? And so a year later, I actually came back to Australia quite disheartened because initially I felt very disappointed in myself, wasn't able to find a job to stay in Switzerland. There's a lot of visa restrictions, and kind of the same story when you were international students studying an overseas country. So I was very disappointed. And then the second wave of that disappointment was more deep rooted because I start questioning, is this what I want? And I almost felt like betrayed by my own life. Like everyone talks about how childhood dream is what we're meant to be doing. I'm like, if my childhood dream is to be a lawyer, why mine is not coming to like manifestation or becoming a reality? Is there something wrong with me? So for about a couple months, I felt my entire identity was stripped away because it was so conditioned upon my profession, my identity of being a lawyer. So I was very lost, to say the least, around 2014, 2015. And then I had about a few months not doing anything. And I really enjoyed that kind of period of non-doing. I talk about non-doing back then as, I need to stop doing too much, but never really experienced the power of that until such time was forced upon by life. So in the first half of 2015, after coming back from Geneva, I literally wasn't working much. I was merely tutoring, one day a week. So earning minimum wage, and somehow I had ample time to count flowers, the clouds in the park, reading, and doing a lot of things I wasn't able to do before. Actually, to learn more about mindfulness, to learn more about meditation during that period of time. And then I remember one Monday morning, I was on the train to go to a park and everyone was suited up on the train going to work. I was the only person smiling. Everyone looked like very dreaded to go to work. I wasn't sure, was it because the weather in Melbourne that day was pretty dark or gravy, but that was the moment I thought, wow, actually, maybe, our inner happiness is not absolutely linked with our job or career. So that was a time I started pondering, apart from law, what can I do to change? Because that little girl, actually, her dream was about changing, helping others. It was just her limited understanding of how she made a connection with that dream with lawyering. But maybe now with the hindsight, with the wisdom of the older me, maybe I can find a different form to carry out the essence of that dream. So that's when this vague idea of Peace Lab came about.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful because it's true, isn't it? Our expectations, or that we've self-imposed or that others have imposed on us, are not always. It's nice to have and I think this is generally true about life. If we set an expectation, then we're quite setting ourselves up for a disappointment. It's just perhaps I'd like to work in the happiness field, and then whatever manifests from that is ideal, I suppose. Then the dream comes true, rather than, I think a lot of people set these hard and fast goals. I'll go and the traditional things. I'll go and get a good career, get married, have children, live happily ever after, have a few holidays, and that's what my life will look like. And when it doesn't start looking like that, or rather I don't get the joy, the spark of joy out of life, why not? But that was imposed upon me, or I imposed it upon myself, that this is what life should look like. But we're also individual. We're really individual perspectives of the one whole. And unless we are being that authentic self, I don't think we're going to find that happiness and,
Yeah,
and, our, and our purpose.
definitely. I think one thing I've learned looking back is that being authentic self. However, I do have to profess, I thought the younger me was being very true to herself in her mission and vision, because until such time we really stop, then question and reflect. I couldn't tell. The younger years, especially you could recall back in law school, the career path, in those days are very single, private practice unless you get into private practice, in a top tier firm. You really can't see other alternative career path. I know these days, the landscape of career guidance is very different now. But I just remember back in law school, that was what was presented to us. So I thought that was my authentic desire. I couldn't even tell the difference,
Yeah.
Yeah. So until such time, like I was given the opportunity or forced upon the opportunity to really just stop asking, what do I really want? And to separate the essence of the dream from the form of the dream. And I think that made a huge difference for me. It's like, what do I want in terms of, okay, if it's changing the world, helping others, or being happy, right? There's so many ways to carry out that dream, but it's to get into the bottom of the essence of what we want, the desire or intention we wish to take upon the world.
Yeah, and I think there's also some real value. As you said, there's no accidents, really.
Mm.
There is no accidents. Everything happens exactly perfectly as it should. Now, often we're given what we don't want. So we know, or we can more define what we do want. So our energies are just saying, oh yeah, this is yuck.
Mm.
I'd rather have the other thing, or more of a definition on what the happy ending is going to look like. Because as you say, you thought, if I become a lawyer, then I can do good in the world. But you can also become a lawyer and do good in the world, and it looks different to the mainstream path. And so trying that out, you've been able to reflect and say, yeah, no, that's not good. But what I really love is that these things dropped into you when you're not in your head. So you're walking along the river and they just drop in. And it's
Yes.
what I think people can really take away from life now, is learning that the mind or the brain is just a repository of information. It just processes past data. It's getting out of that space we think we know to our knowing, to the space that things drop in, and you get that inspiration, and then you take an action if you listen.
That's very beautifully said, because I feel we are living in an age whereby we have so much information around us, and we tend to absorb so much information. However, I really like the word wisdom. Wisdom is quite contrary to just absorbing the information or knowledge. It's
Yeah.
about practicing what we know. And a lot of time when we are so busy in our head, we're actually not really in touch with our wisdom aspect of ourselves. And because when we're busy looking out, that's where information, mostly those inputs that are external to us, when we're so busy looking outwards, it's hard for us to really truly in touch with the wisdom inside we can hear a lot of times. So as I mentioned, non-doing is actually a very beautiful concept from the ancient Eastern philosophy in the Taoist concept. In the small book called the Tao Te Ching, written by Lao Tzu, it was only like very short, a very thin book. But one of the verse talks about doing, non-doing. In Chinese, it says as wei, wu wei, 3 characters only. And it's quite puzzling, and a lot of the books or articles being written upon that. So my personal take in the past few years of this balancing between doing and the non-doing is that we can't just do, go all the time. We really need to take time to pause. But non-doing is not passive. It's not about doing nothing. It's actually can be quite active, like we take time in meditation, not only for the purposes of relaxation, but to undertake deep reflection of our beliefs, of our perceptions, of our thoughts. So when we do take action, right, it's coming from that authentic place, that place whereby it's truly aligned. So we don't take act. You know, a lot of times I look at myself. A lot of my actions when it's taking a very hurried or very worried state will be very different when I take action from a more calm and peaceful mindset. So that non-doing can be very powerful. Simply mean that we can actually making sure identify our own thoughts, beliefs, perceptions before taking a very outward directed action.
And I love what you just said. I loved all of that, because that is what I think people have not embraced at this time. They think to achieve something, I have to do things. Yes, there is a doing, but that's a secondary action.
Yeah.
It is secondary, because the word alignment, it dropped into me the other day to understand that I was contemplating the word alignment. And what I got was that alignment is being here now. It means you're feeling good, because if you're not feeling very good, you're out of alignment. And then I thought, well, how do I explain that to people? I thought it's because you're thinking, if you're out of alignment, you're not in the present moment, which means you're dredging up some past data to predict a future event. And that is not now, because right in this now moment is effectively all you have, of course, unless you want to drag the past into the now when you're being. And that's not totally being. And these are concepts that are why we meditate, I believe, is to not to get rid of thought, but just to disconnect from them, just to disassociate, say, oh, there's a thought, I see it, but it's not me. It's not me. I'm here now, I'm watching the thought. And the thought can do with the thought whatever the thought wants. But to be in alignment is to really be in the now moment and not, projecting a future outcome on the past. That is anxiety. That's where people get anxiety from. They think, I have a set of data points that are saying, I only have experienced this in the past, so my future outlook is narrow. This or this might happen. However, if you don't work on the past as your data point or your database of where you can draw and just sit in the now moment, you think, actually anything at all could happen.
Yeah.
Anything. We've seen it happen.
Indeed.
And this kind of, very recently, we've seen anything could actually happen. And if you go in with that space, you actually may be able to then take a step forward. Oh, anything could happen now. Anything could happen. And you've just changed your energy about the spaces that you're moving through.
Yeah. And COVID, no one could have expected that COVID would happen, because last year, I remember I was in China visiting my family, taking my usual annual visit, to see my family. And I think no one would imagine the whole world could be on a pause. There's no books to go buy, right? So if we have very set mindset, nothing could have happened. But now looking back a year later, there are certain things, actually arguably, good coming out of COVID as well.
Oh, yeah.
At least like corporate, in the work sense, a lot of flexible working arrangements. And now we know, when we put our minds to it, when the IT puts all the mind to it, we can have a digital transformation, not driven by the CFO, but not driven by the CTO, but driven by COVID. I saw that joke, people say, who is the key driver of the digital transformation 2020? CEO, CTO, the last one is COVID-19.
COVID, COVID-19. I love that. It's true, but I think that's something the collective consciousness asked for, and of course, that's a very deep conversation to have, because we're all wanting a shift. The way we were headed, I believe, was a little bit pointless. Where are we going? What are we doing? Rather than, I think COVID pulled us in to self-reflect. It made us all pause. Take that pause you just said. And many people have changed their direction because of it. So it's like, whoa, what do I want out of my life? And is this what I want? And those moments are really vital. Let's not have a COVID event so that we can learn, let's stop a moment, is keep checking in with self all the time. Do I feel good? Do I feel good? I mean, that's my mantra, is how do I feel? How do I feel? How do I feel? If I'm still feeling good, keep doing this. If I'm not feeling so good, why not? They're all questions to ponder on. And am I working on past events or my rules from the past to say that this is what I should be doing? Because many people are in that space, aren't they? They're thinking this is what I should do. I should be a lawyer. I should, that's what I worked hard for. It's my identity. I worked all these years for it. But it doesn't mean you don't take your skill set with you. whatever you're doing, you are still you. You've just learned some things. You've gathered more data along the way,
Yeah.
and
I
everything
just
is
want
perfect.
I want to make comment on you talking about the past and the uncertainty about the future. So for me, start undertaking my master's with King's College in applied neuroscience really kind of validated my perception on this. Because again, going back to the Eastern philosophy, there's a very beautiful concept called the beginner's mind, 初心. So it's a Zen Buddhist concept, but when I talk about Zen Buddhism, they're coming from Japan, but somehow it's an infusion between the ancient Indian Buddhism, but also the Chinese Taoism. The beginner's mind to me is a beautiful concept. It talks about how when we have a very fixated or expert mind, we tend to see less possibilities. But with the beginner's mind, like a child's mind, you wake up every morning, you actually don't you're not too attached to the past you mentioned or the past rules, what has happened, but you look out to the future or the present moment thinking everything's new. So that was a philosophical concept. But when I start doing studying in applied neuroscience, that's actually how our brain is wired for. Our brain is very plastic. It's wired for change. And the brain, actually, the best thing for the brain is uncertainty in a way, because when we're in a new environment, the brain has the opportunity, if we give that option, right, to wire, to make new neuron connections, to learn. And the best thing for the brain is to learn by new experiences. So we don't have to. The one thing is you mentioned about how the brain records everything. It is the brain reflects our beliefs mostly from the past, but we're not doomed, because the brain every day is given the opportunity, if you allow yourself to learn something new, to take a new belief, to take a new thought, to take a new direction, then it will support you by forming a new neuron connection. And that's why I've learned one thing is sometimes when it's very unfamiliar, we feel a bit scared, or I'm not sure whether this is for me, it doesn't feel right. But what if not feeling right is actually what you needed? It doesn't feel right because it's not familiar, because your brain doesn't have the neuron pathway to support that. So we've been walking, certain path in our mind garden, what I call, for 30 years. Like, if we're not feeling ourselves worthy or good enough for 30 years, there's a quite ingrained pathway for that to reflect that belief in the brain. However, if one day we decide, I wanted to feel good about myself, to feel worthy, initially you will feel strange because you don't have a very strong neuron pathway to support that level of thinking. However, if we practice that every day, day by day, it's like we walking, a new path in the garden, in the forest. Eventually, it will feel familiar. It will feel strengthened and grounded, integrated in the
Yeah.
brain as well.
Because so many of us are living in Groundhog Day. You wake up, same familiar thoughts, do the same familiar things, go to bed. It just you're stuck in this thought feeling loop that you can't progress, you can't evolve, you can't expand, because you probably don't even know. And this is another thing that I sort of look at is the unconscious beliefs that we don't even know exist half of the time. And so when something's triggering us, it's like our mirror. It's just like, wow, it's giving you information. If that's unpleasant, step in. Why does it feel bad? Let's look at it. Let's not run from it. Let's not go shopping or eat chocolate or go to the pub. Let's not do that. Let's instead sit with it and say, oh, wow, what is this feeling? Because that's the only way we can progress and get more data is from using all our senses. And I think many of us don't, particularly lawyers. We're trained in this intellectual way of being, which is awesome, but that's only a part of who a human is. And so when you have discounted all the other senses in the body, eventually you can't use them. So you're missing out on a lot more data that's out there. And that extra data will help you move through these thought feeling loops that get you stuck in time. Effectively, you're in a time warp, and part of you is stuck. And you think, why can't I progress my life? Why is everyone annoying me? What's going on here? And it's really as simple as that. But often we can't see it, can we? Because it's unconscious.
Yeah, but as you said, the kind of the signal point is how we feel. The body will give you the sensation, or the feeling will give you the sensation, and that to me is always the first point. And you just feel, okay, it doesn't feel right, and then just don't ignore it or push it away. Go deeper. And I think that's
Yeah.
really important. So I always using feeling as a first point, as a signal. Something's not right there, because in a way it could be the chemical reaction in your body, right? But that always driven by underlying thought. So that's how your feeling and your thinking working together. And I read a book a few years ago now by Dr. Joe Dispenza. I think he mentioned feeling or emotions are the language of the body, and the thoughts
Yeah.
are of the mind, which now I think there's a validity to that, because the thoughts are really electrical messengers, communication in the neurons in the brain, but somehow feelings more chemical in that regard. So I really encourage, when I teach, run workshops, I really encourage including lawyers, especially lawyers, as you said, to get in touch with how we feel. When there's a yucky or kind of uncomfortable feelings, it's a gold mine for change, because
Yeah, it is.
there's something there. And also,
Yeah.
you go. I think you want to say
No,
something.
no, no, no. Yeah, no, no, no. It's just I just love all this stuff, as we know. We know, but I just wanted to take you to the word love that you've come up with this. You said that in Chinese it has the same pronunciation as the English word I. And when I read that, I was so excited about it. I thought, I've never heard of that. And that is, coming to self-love. Now, when we're talking about lawyers and law, a couple of things. Words in law, well, there really isn't a definition of love in the law at all. We don't like the word, we won't use it, and it's a scary word. And I believe there is some underlying reasoning behind that. Is I believe we're all looking for love, so we don't know what it is. So that's a human journey, but that's my philosophy of it. And the feeling self is to coming to connecting with self and loving self, or at least knowing self. Know thyself is such a powerful thing. And when we're in this head of ours all the time, there is the rest of us that exists. So that word, and I love how you came up with it. So tell me about that.
So this came to me one day unexpectedly during a very deep meditation. The words I in Chinese, or the English word I, being there for thousands of years, I didn't invent those words. I was literally sitting there meditating, and it just all of a sudden there was these two words side by side, and it just hit me. Wow, that was the essence of love. Actually, you have to start with self-love. And that's the essence of who we are. I means self. And so we are love in a way. But also interestingly, in the Chinese character love, I, it has a very important symbol, because the Chinese language is based on characters. So in the middle, there is a character of the heart. And then at the bottom of the I is the word for friendship, yo. So the secondary message to that is you have to be a friend, a genuine first, like a best friend to yourself. When I say best, doesn't mean you sugarcoat everything. The best kind of friends is very constructive. They will let you know when you go off the path, right? But they will also love you unconditionally. So that is something I thought, wow. So self-love is actually being my own best friend. And that it's very important to me, because I think a lot of lawyers in particular are very critical voices. And I actually did a bit of interview among my own friends, including a few of my lawyer friends. On average, most of us actually tend to be the worst enemy rather than our best friend. So my ratio would be in the past, possibly, I'll be very critical. 80% of the time, I'm my own worst enemy. Maybe 20% time, I was okay friend. So the idea is to shift that kind of a balancing, and be my own best friend, or a good friend to myself most of the time, above 60%. It's okay if sometimes I'm upset with myself. That's all right. That's reasonable. But the idea is shift that relationship with ourselves towards a more love-oriented
Yeah,
relationship.
and that's the thing. We're trained to be critical. Of course, we don't want to miss details. We've got to critique everything, and why not ourselves? It's in the mix. We're part of life, and that sort of idea of training is unhelpful in the overall scheme of things. Yes, we're looking for what we're trained to do, but I think we've embodied that training to such a great degree that we've forgotten to connect with self. And that's really, I think, where a lot of the systemic change needs to happen with the
Yeah.
lawyer
I think with the law, when it's embodied, I think it's actually ingrained in our brain. And I have this little hypothesis, because the brain is very plastic. The brain really is, changed through experiences that includes our work, education. So you can imagine, as a lawyer, we were trained to study. We always look for the worst case scenario, and the risk identifying. So if that's how the brain is day in, day out working at that function, that aspect of thinking process, it filter through, because the brain doesn't have a section for work, or okay, when I switch off my computer, I'm going to my living room. It doesn't work that way. The brain is in its totality. So if constantly, and since the day you went into law school, and then we spend like 20-30 years as a legal practitioner, you can imagine the brain has its own unique characteristics for lawyers. So in a way, I feel that explains why lawyers together with doctors have some of the highest rates of mental illness, because the brain is constantly on a very different direction, looking for problems, looking for risk as part of our job, right? But also programming, but also the nature of the brainwave. Critical thinking is fundamental to be a good lawyer, but to be critically thinking, 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours a day, your brain needs to be engaged constantly at the beta brainwave. It's okay, beta brain is great for critical thinking, but chronically, right, it might be quite risky for us in the sense of developing, chronic fatigue and stress. Stress, again, is great, when we have engaged stress periodically, but constantly, it's really taking a toll on our body, because we're not designed to do that.
And we're more than our brain. We are the body, the mind, body, spirit, the whole enchilada, we're the whole lot. So it does require, it's, as I say, we don't mind going through pain to get our bodies into shape. We don't mind doing that at all. We'll go through boot camp, we'll do all that stuff, we'll have aching muscles, and we think this is awesome, we're going to get into shape. We have to do the same with our emotions. We have to go through an emotional boot camp, do emotional hygiene, look after our emotions just as well. Know they exist for a start, accept them. Accept we are, in my view, all that is. So if you're pushing something away, you're pushing away a part of yourself, and that's disconnecting from you again. You're saying, again, critical, all right, I'm unacceptable. There's much philosophy and all that. But yeah, it's we're the whole package, and it's very important that we balance those things.
Indeed. And I think, again, coming back to Eastern philosophy, emotion in Chinese medicine, it's quite important for health as well. So the idea is, when the disease is a result of stuck emotions, that's why each major organs in the Chinese medicine is assigned with a particular emotion. So when we actually do not release our emotion, when we ignore, push them away, that's actually what you resist persists. But for me, as a lawyer, and also coming from China, in a way, it's interesting, we don't talk emotion openly, although the ancient philosophy really emphasized on moving around emotion, which is quite a paradoxical to the modern China as well. But I learned one thing is using emotion first to feel it. I used to refuse to feel my emotions, scared, petrified of emotions, and that also comes down to the popular media saying don't be emotional, and be rational, logical, and then it takes on a different level for lawyers as well. But I think it's a key thing to know there's no bad or good emotion, and see them as a signpost. For me, again, coming back, using that as a signpost to go deeper. Why do I feel this emotion? Because underneath that, there is a particular set of belief, perception, to make you feel that. A lot of times, it's not the things happening, it's because what is underlying that structural belief and perception causing that emotion. So definitely using that as a very good signpost for me.
Yes. And so you're teaching all this in Peace Lab?
Yes.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I integrate, as a Peace Lab, but then it needs to be both the ancient wisdom and contemporary science. They go hand in hand, I feel.
Yeah, and I think if more people just dip their toe in, there's so many benefits to just hearing about this wisdom. Even if you bring a little bit into practice every day. So let's round out now, Elva. So if you were to say to a lawyer, just to give them a couple of tips to bring it into their everyday practice, what would you say to make them feel a little better in their day job, bringing a little bit of love in?
Bring a little bit. Okay, first start with loving yourself. Be your own best friend, like being a good friend to yourself. And the first step in terms of practical tip is checking with yourself, checking with how you feel. And I would suggest, if you have time, start your morning, even just with 5 minutes meditation or mindfulness, or just setting an intention. It's very simple. And if you can, secondly, throughout the day, check in with this. Ask yourself the question, how am I feeling this moment? And if you do feel a bit negative emotions, say, what is going on there? And having a dialogue with yourself and start observing and taking time to not just pay attention to the external world, but pay some attention to the internal world, how your body is feeling, how your mind is talking to yourself. That to me is really important, but also very simple in terms of life changing.
Yeah, it is. It is so very simple, but so very paradoxically so difficult, because it's just something we have to retrain, and it's not hard. It's just we have to be on it. We have to retrain
Yeah.
ourselves to think a different way.
Because the brain takes time to be sculptured. So if we wanted to make that decision, it needs to be a daily practice and be compassionate with ourselves, because we will dip in and dip out from different states of emotions and the thought patterns. But that's okay. And that's why we're human and we're here to grow.
And it is perfect. Everything is perfect as far as I'm concerned. Absolutely everything. There is nothing wrong. And I think a lot of people we judge ourselves on, oh, I'm not doing this right. No, you're doing everything just perfectly right for where you are right now. You are perfect. You are the perfect human for where you are at right now. And it's your own journey. There's nothing to do with anyone else, which I love too. So are you running courses at the moment so that people can check in? They can check in on your website?
Yes, so I'm currently working full time, which I will scale back a little bit later this year. So we'll go back to teach again, which I miss teaching. So last year I started a podcast for Peace Lab 2020, which you came on sharing your journey
It was
with
great.
me as well. Yes, it was really fun. So we will continue the journey, and maybe in the next 2 months I'll roll out some online courses again. And because again, thanks to COVID, now we can all be connected teaching classes through Zoom as well. So stay tuned as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being on the broadcast today, Elva. I absolutely love what you do as usual. We're all on the same page here. So, support Elva and her work, because she's got some beautiful wisdom and neuroscience now to teach you. And if you're a lawyer who brings more love into your legal practice in an own unique way, let me speak properly, everything's perfect, then we'd love to hear from you. So do contact us with the details set out below for you. And we thank you so much for being with us today, Elva. Thank you, and until next time.
No worries. Until next time.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.